The main objective of today is to look at the AEC not as a hype, but as a whole, as part of an ASEAN community project that has gone on and on, up and down, sideways for the last 48 years. It's remarkable. ASEAN is very unnatural. It's come a very long way for being unnatural. I don't think that it's going to go the way that many people think it will in terms of the AEC, but we'll talk about that in the subsequent sessions. I have a couple of other speakers, so I want to also tell you that the lunch, we have two ambassadors from Indonesia and Philippines. They're going to speak about the political security community of ASEAN and the socio-cultural community. So we want to understand AEC, not as AEC, but to look at the AEC from looking at other parts of ASEAN, other parts of the picture. I think the AEC has been overly hyped in Thailand, but it's a good thing. The way that we've looked at the AEC, the adjustments that we've made for the AEC in Thailand, which is at the forefront of the ASEAN states, ASEAN economies in focusing on the AEC, has been equivalent to kind of a crisis. You know, when you only make adjustments when you have crisis adjustments and reforms. So the AEC has done that for Thailand. So we'll look at that. And the lunch conversation will be about other aspects of the ASEAN community and how they interact with the AEC. I want to now invite our morning speakers. First, Mr. Ken Koniaki, the publisher of the Nikkei Asian Review. The Nikkei is a Japanese, as you know, media group. They have had a vision. They envisage being more engaged, immersed in Asia, especially in Southeast Asia. They have located their headquarters now in Singapore and Bangkok. And you can see the magazine. You have a packet of all the bios. The magazine of the Nikkei. Nikkei now is available in the airline lounges and on the airplane and so on. So they've been a partner with AEC for a series of ASEAN-related, East Asia-related forums and conferences. So this is the big one. This is the flagship so far that we've had. So please, Ken. And then, of course, I want to invite Dr. Surin Pitsuwan, and he needs no introduction. I can only say, just for the initial remarks, that he's very busy in huge demand, so he's made time available for us today. I'm very grateful for that. Dr. Surin, please join us on the stage. Okay, we intend to have a semi-formal day. It's not going to be too formal, so we'll have a conversation. First, Kun Ken is going to say a few things about Nikkei and how Nikkei sees the region, and also something about ASEAN for a few minutes, and then I'll proceed with our keynote speech. Kun Ken.
Thank you, Dr. Titna. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Jay, thank you for a kind introduction. It was really, really moving to me. As Dr. Titnan said, Nikkei, as a Japanese daily newspaper, is determined to become an Asian publication, Asian news organization. So we established a regional business headquarters in Singapore last year, as well as the editorial headquarters here in Bangkok. I'll tell you a little bit of story about it because it's related to the AEC. First, we started discussing which country we should place our business headquarters 2 years ago about. We did a lot of research and ended up in choosing Singapore. Why? Because all the other countries had lots of regulations, and especially labor regulation, labor laws were very complicated. And of course, Singapore has a tax advantage. So we decided to place our business headquarters in Singapore, despite the fact Singapore is not the best country for a media organization to place their headquarters. And I think this is an implication of a possibility that ASEAN economic community expands towards the future. Because if all these member countries loosen or abolish all those non-tariff regulations, non-tariff laws, non-tariff procedures, it would expand a lot of business opportunities. So our decision making, although Japan is not an ASEAN country, but I think it's the same can be said about ASEAN countries as well. The fact that we are choosing Singapore as a business headquarters implies a lot of possibilities that ASEAN economic community potentially has. But there are a lot of skepticisms about ASEAN economic community. Maybe there is a scorecard, AEC scorecard, and it is fulfilled probably 60, 70%. But time is running. We are already about to entering into April, so we have only 6 months, or no, 8 months ahead towards the end of the 2015, which is the deadline for the launch of the ASEAN Economic Community formally. To-do list is very long still. Lots of things, especially about non-tariff things, and also free flow of people and free flow of services, which are only slowly improving. Look at the title of this conference today. It's called Era of the AEC. I know there are a lot of to-do lists and there are a lot of skepticisms, and people still are discussing whether or not it is achievable to launch formally this ASEAN Economic Community this year. But I think it is not the thing. I mean, it's not the nature of the AEC. Nature of AEC, it's a work in progress always. It's not something you can launch in one shot at one time. It's a work in progress probably forever. It's something like Cathedral in Barcelona. I mean, you can never end. So we named this conference the Era of AEC because it is already the era of AEC. And we have to think about how we are going to manage the community and how we are going to develop the community. And I think discussions we are hearing today will be all about what we are going to do and what we are going to see. So please join us exploring the possibilities and further to the list for the coming years. And thank you for inviting me and inviting Nikkei Asian Review as a co-sponsor, co-host. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Kent. When we came up with the title, it took us 2 days of debate. And we wanted to have a different kind of title because, I think every week there's some kind of a AEC workshop or conference. But the main purpose is to add some value, to look at the AEC in ways that other people have not looked at the AEC. So we came up with some scenarios, stakes, and strategies. I also want to thank, at this time, our co-host, Nikkei Asian Review, of course, but also the International Business, Logistics, and Transport Department of Thammasat Business School, and then the Dopia Turkey Group, the media group. In addition, our sponsors, you can see the Stock Exchange of Thailand, the Petroleum Authority of Thailand, ThaiBev, which owns this hotel, Bangkok Asset Management, Kasikorn Bank. So thank all of them, and thank to our co-hosts. We couldn't do it without the support of our co-hosts. People think that ISIS is a big office. Actually, we have 3 staff, and it took us a lot to do this, but we couldn't do it without a lot of help from our co-hosts. Now we come to the main speaker. Today is not the first time that Dr. Surin Pitsuwan has spoken about the AEC. As you can imagine, he's been I think he speaks a lot about ASEAN in different places. I think he is effectively the regional spokesman for ASEAN. And I think that many of us still wish that he never had to leave office The contract is limited. Eventually, his term was up, but he was the best, most effective, most outspoken, charismatic, if I may add, flamboyant, Secretary General of ASEAN we've ever had, and I think they will have for years to come. So in recent months, he's been around in all kinds of places, and I know because I'm a Facebook fan of his, and he's got the photos up, he talks in Europe and in different countries. And it has to do with ASEAN, it has to do with our region. This region is really up and coming, is an indisputable, undeniable region with the combined collective growth trajectory of 5 to 6%. That's one of the highest, probably perhaps the most reliably highest in all the regions of the world, which is remarkable. Now, within ASEAN, it's mixed. Thailand lower, of course, Cambodia, Laos, lower base, higher growth, and the other countries, the other economies are dynamic and robust in their own ways. So, Dr. Surin, I'm not asking you to give the most profound talk ever on the AEC. I think we just would like to hear at this time today how the AEC, we've heard a lot of faddish comments, a lot of remarks about the AEC, the way people look at AEC, but we want to understand the AEC in a more holistic, wholesome, not just a hype, but the wholesome concept, realization, reality, prospects, dynamics of the ASEAN community as a whole and the AEC as a core driver component of it. So please share with us your thinking for the next 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes, and perhaps if there are a few questions in the room, we could entertain that. Dr. Surin Pitsuwan.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Thitinan. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Thitinan described me as, I guess, the spokesman of ASEAN. And I have a story to tell, Ambassador Wise. Don't take this personally. In my travel during my time as Secretary General of ASEAN, I found myself in Paris, in a hurry to catch a plane back to Singapore, I believe. And I needed a hair cream. So I asked the embassy car to stop by a pharmacy to get a hair cream. And it was late. And the salesman said, I have only one kind, and it is the best. And I have only one tube. You need it, I have used it, and it is great. I was sold. I paid him, went to the register, looked up. He said he used the hair cream. I looked up. He was bald. So, for the last 5-7 years, I have been the spokesman of ASEAN, not only ASEAN, but East Asia integration as a whole. Because looking back at the evolution of Europe, ambassadors, you needed champions of the idea of the vision of Europe. And Europe were able to bring in people from a cross-section of European political ideologies. The Christian Democrat, the Social Democrats, the Communists, the Socialists, all colors in Europe working together toward one idea, and that is one Europe. Well, Henry Kissinger once made a statement that East Asia, as far as growth, as far as technological advances, innovation, East Asia is, he said this last century, equivalent to 20th century Europe. But as far as system, processes, and institutions, to take care of the problems that they have among them and between them, he said East Asia is still 19th century Europe. Meaning we need to build institutions, we need to build systems and processes in order to bring us together, in order to integrate us together, in order to take advantage of all the potentials that we have in the region. This is the center of gravity now. ASEAN happens to be in the middle of that center of growth. And East Asia has been expected as the new locomotive to pull the global recovery from the crisis that we have had since 2008. ASEAN has something called the convening power. None other countries, none other dialogue partners in the region could call a meeting and everybody would want to come. Because they had problems. They have problems. They have historical baggage between themselves and among themselves. But when ASEAN calls a meeting, everybody would want to come. Europe is still knocking on the door for EAS East Asia Summit. Why AEC is so important, so being hyped so much, and so attractive? Because AEC is, in one word, the raison d'être of the ASEAN community. It's the reason for ASEAN community. I remember back in the late 80s, leaders of ASEAN were using the phrase, the oxygen of foreign investment has been diverted out from Southeast Asia to Northeast Asia, to China, to West Asia, to South Asia, to India. Foreign direct investment had been the main reason for growth, for industrialization, for transformation in Southeast Asia. Now, without becoming one integrated market, one holistic, or at least the vision of that one integrated market, Southeast Asia, ASEAN would not be able to compete with China, compete with India. So from the very beginning, it's the raison d'être, the reason for the being of the ASEAN community. Why is it so attractive? Because it's more concrete. It is most relevant. It's about the pocketbooks. It's about your income. It's about your employment. It's about your unemployment. Therefore, everybody is interested in the ASEAN economic community. How much we have achieved? A great deal. You could only think about Southeast Asia without ASEAN. How much we have to do more? A lot more. But ladies and gentlemen, ASEAN is here. ASEAN economic community is here. AEC comprises of companies like AirAsia, like CIMB, like Bangkok Bank, like Thai Bev. Because these are the components that make AEC a reality. They are already moving into the region. When you land at Bangkok Airport, there's a big sign, Bangkok Bank, local expertise, regional aspiration. What is that? CIMB said, ASEAN for you, 2.4 trillion US dollars combined, GDP, 2.5, 2.6, export, trade among ourselves and with the world. Potential is there. UOB is here. UOB is all across the land of Southeast Asia, of ASEAN. These companies are components that make AEC a reality. But we have a long journey in front of you. The problem with ASEAN is that leaders, ministers, bureaucrats conceive of these things probably with little support or little awareness or little participation from the private sector. And the private sector, except some countries, private sector are waiting for the AEC to be a finished product, wrapped in a beautiful bow tie, given to the leaders at the end of this year and said, Mr. Leader, Mr. Chair, happened to be Najib Razak of Malaysia at the end of this year. Mr. Chair, it is done. It's not going to be something like that. Ken is right. It's going to be always in a work in progress. Much like the EU. And the EU is now trying to improve upon the areas where the EU is not perfect. ASEAN is a community in search of perfection, continuously into the future, much like everything else. But ASEAN has a lot to achieve and to do. Of 2.6 trillion US dollars that we trade among ourselves only 1/4 of that. So economic community cannot be sustainable if you trade among yourself only 1/4 of your total trade. Compared to NAFTA, compared to EU, we are far behind as far as the intra-ASEAN trade. How to increase that 25%? We have tried that for a long, long time. Only if we cross borders to invest in each other's economies. And Nikkei is doing something to help us, and that is to focus on potentials and opportunities available on the landscape. We need to encourage our SMEs. We need to support our SMEs to cross borders. We need to encourage our young people to cross borders. ASEAN is not for the older generation. I am sorry. The older generation has made their contribution. They have built companies, they have built corporations. Now it's for the younger generation, those who know the language of the market. And it is not just ASEAN market, it has to be the global marketplace. Because we need to integrate with the global trading system. There are 4 goals for AEC. One is one integrated market. You know that. Second, it has to be competitive. Otherwise, we couldn't compete with China. We couldn't compete with India. We couldn't compete with Africa. We couldn't compete with Latin America. The third, we have to be equitable among ourselves. And that is difficult. Because from Cambodia, from Laos, from Myanmar to Singapore, $54,000 US a year per head, Singapore. To less than $3 a day, Myanmar, Cambodia. That gap is just too wide and too big for a community to be sustained. And then we have internal inequity among ourselves. A country like Thailand, for the past 13 years, if you like the number 13, we have had problems in this country because of the periphery and because of the center, because of the urban areas and because of the rural areas. So we couldn't really have a stable, continuous, effective governance system that could bring the best out of this land of smile of ours. Indonesia would face the same problem. Myanmar would face the same problem. Philippines would face the same problem. Inequities inside is critical for every ASEAN country. So we need to be equitable. The 4th pillar of ASEAN, economic community, is to be able to integrate it, to be able to integrate seamlessly, effortlessly with the global trading system. How do you do that? You can only integrate with the global system, trading system, production system, if you improve your standards. If you change your legal systems some way that you could accommodate the rest. Because you can't ask for access to markets to the rest of the world when you close your own market. It has to be a two-way system. They open up for you, you open up for them. That's the logic of globalization. That's the logic of the ASEAN Economic Community. So, yes, we have achieved, according to the scorecards, I think more than 70%, Ken. I think it's 80+%. But the measurement is only at the level of agreements and ratification of those agreements at the national level. But it is a long way from national ratification, from national legislative bodies to say yes to this agreement, to the implementation of those agreements at the borders. How people move, how goods move, how services are accessed to, from Singapore to Thailand, from Thailand to Vietnam, from Vietnam to Laos to Cambodia. Services. You don't have to move yourself. Consumers don't have to move yourself, but you can use services here through the new technology. How can you integrate all these systems together in order to make it free flow of goods, free flow of services, and yes, at the end, it has to be free flow of people. But ASEAN stops short of saying it has to be a free flow of people because of the inequity that I talked about earlier. In Europe, yes, free flow of people, but even Europe has problems. From the new members into the old members, from Bulgaria, from the Czech Republic into Western Europe. You have these problems. ASEAN learned the lessons from Europe, so we use the phrase free movement of skilled labor. And yet, economies of ASEAN need laborers from each other. And that is something unique about ASEAN too. The fact that it is inequitable, it can help each other with raw materials, with labor. Thailand alone has about 3 to 5 million foreign workers. A lot of them are illegal. And many of these foreign workers are working in the jobs that Thais do not want to work anymore. They move away. The fishery industry, Mahachai, the whole province of Samut Sakhon, has more foreigners than Thai nationals. If these labor walked out tomorrow, the Thai fishery industry, the Thai fishery business, food production going to flop tomorrow. So we have these problems, but we need to somehow find the balance. And we help each other. And we need to rationalize this foreign labor market among ourselves. We need to protect them. We need to give them support. We need to give them their welfare. We need to protect their human rights. Those are the things that ASEAN need to do. But we stop short of saying it's free flow of people. We can't. Otherwise, these economies, particularly Thailand, in the middle of it, will be engulfed, will be flooded by foreign workers. And we need to look into that issue more carefully. Now, investment from outside, about 140 billion US dollars a year. Going where? Not Thailand, the second largest economy of ASEAN, the most diversified, and not to Indonesia, the largest. Indonesia calls itself a 1 trillion economy. Imagine 2.5, 2.6 trillion US dollars combined GDP. It's already Indonesia's 40%. Thailand is far behind, about less than 400 billion US dollars a year GDP, but it is the most diversified. You would expect that the 140, 150 billion US dollars coming into ASEAN, foreign direct investment, would come to countries like Indonesia and Malaysia and Thailand. No. Why? Because of the lack of transparency among us. Goes to Singapore first, Ken. Because Singapore could guarantee that, yes, it will be transparent, at least here on this island. When we go out, we don't know. That's another story. But it goes into Singapore first. And for your interests of 140 billion US dollars, 70% of that goes into the service industry. Meaning what? Meaning the quality of life is being expected on the landscape. Meaning the expansion of the middle class, meaning the rising purchasing power of the middle class is now demanding higher quality of life, better services, education, logistics, health, insurance, every kind of business, even sports, even recreation, even entertainment, because the landscape is expecting more and more services in the improvement, for the improvement of the quality of life. So it is an open landscape. A lot of foreign investment coming in. It is up to us how to make sure that we can welcome that foreign investment and let it flow, let it come, and let it be distributed on this landscape, aspiring to be equal, but still very much unequal and unequitable. But that's also an attractive in itself, an attraction in itself. But we need to work on connecting our landscape together and improve on those institutional requirements, those tariffs and non-tariff barriers. We have reduced tariff. We have put that on paper. We have done very well. The 6 countries have achieved a very, very good record of no tariff between us and among us. Very little left. But more non-tariff barriers coming up because of inequality among us. Why non-tariff barriers? Because we would like to protect our markets. The bigger the markets, the more reluctant the countries to open up. And I have found that those who are somewhere in the middle, like Thailand, like Malaysia, like in the Philippines, like Indonesia, are most difficult markets to really comply with the agreements that we have made. Because we have a lot to protect. You talk to Laos, you talk to Cambodia, you talk to Myanmar, they are easier to say yes. Because they don't have much to protect. So we have to work on those things. Anyway, I will stop by telling you a story about my conversation with Hillary Clinton, who came to see the Secretariat at the beginning of 2009 when she just became Secretary of State. She came to the Secretariat, had a conversation, and she asked me a very, very pointed question. She said, you have this charter, Green Book. How much you intend to practice it? She came from the perspective that has, I think, given ASEAN bad name around the world. Yes, you come, you agree, you go home, and you forget about it. I had to muster my courage, reach down into my educational, my readings, and I said, Madam Secretary, we have to make it a living document. Much like your Declaration of Independence, US. Much like your Constitution. I said, when Thomas Jefferson penned down that phrase, no, what did he say? All men are created equal, endowed with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I said, but he didn't include the slaves, who are human beings. He didn't include white men without property. He didn't include the Indians. And I said, he didn't even include women. But every generation of American leadership, American people, had to appeal to that document in order to expand their own space of freedom to pursue their happiness, to find their own quality of life. Every successive generation of the American people, whether it's Lincoln, whether it's Martin Luther King, whether it's Robert Kennedy, whether It's Barack Obama. He is now sitting in the White House. You are Secretary of State. ASEAN will have to do the same thing. And that is aspiring to perfect our community, knowing that it's going to take a lot of efforts, knowing that the private sector needs to be convinced, knowing that the private sector needs to be brought in order to make a contribution to that community that we want to build. You can't wait on the sideline and expecting it to perform to your benefit. You have to take risks with us. You have to jump in. You have to make a contribution. And that's what is lacking in ASEAN now. It's the work of the leaders, the work of the diplomats, the work of the officials. But the private sector is still quite skeptical. Well, we have to make it a living document. From now on, the private sector will have to make your move, make a contribution, take risk, build this community together. The structure is done, the legal framework is done. It is putting in the furniture, moving in the parts that are necessary for this house to be whole, to be holistic like you want it. And that is still a challenge for all of us. And I hope an activity at ISIS like this, not the other ISIS, this ISIS will make that contribution, will open a space for debate, for exchange, for a conversation. That an ASEAN is not a miracle. It requires a lot of effort from all of us, 600 million plus, and dialogue partners, those who wish us to succeed. And I have seen many capitals that they would want us to succeed. Why? Because if ASEAN succeeds, the world will have one less region to worry about. The world has enough problems in other regions. Let ASEAN succeed, help ASEAN succeed, and it will be beneficial for everyone. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we'll take another 10-15 minutes and trespass into the coffee break because we have Dr. Surin here. We can take some Q&A. As you can see, I see him in three ways. I see you in three ways. He speaks really like a global statesman who happens to come from Southeast Asia. And then we can see that he is the greatest, the best around here in terms of promoting, peddling ASEAN to the world. And in addition, and most importantly, he prods ASEAN from within. And no one like him. That's why we actually had a date, for this conference. On another day, we changed it because it's the only day he's available. And towards the end, he said, "Oh, can we change it again?" I said, "Oh, no, I cannot change it now. Please, you're going to give me a heart attack." So please, we have another 10 minutes or so, and we can take some questions, comments from the floor. I think that we need a couple of microphones. We have them. So raise your hand if you have any question, comment. Dr. Surin mentioned about ASEAN's aim to reach perfection. I think that when they came up with this document, the ASEAN Charter, almost a decade ago, they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. They wanted to maintain some relevance. It was a reaction. ASEAN's reactive. Reaction to the outside, external events. But then they came up with this idea, economic community, and then political security, and then socio-cultural, to be comprehensive. At that time, the political security was not so much of a problem. Now it's a big problem. Political security community is a big problem, and if it's not contained and managed, the economic community, whatever economic cooperation, integration ASEAN cannot come up with, will be irrelevant. And then, of course, socio-cultural. ASEAN, the peoples of ASEAN don't know each other. They don't speak really the same language. They have not traveled within ASEAN. So, there's a long way to go for the economic community. But here's where we want to ask some hard questions, probing dynamics. The CEO of Deutsche Bank, Mr. Frank Krings.
Thank you, Jay. Dr. Surin, you were fairly measured in your remarks as to what will not happen on the 31st of December, end of this year. So if we were to ask, and I'm sure that will be part of the conversation for the rest of the seminar today, what is it actually that will happen towards the end of the year, 31st, come New Year's Eve this year? If I were to get back home to Europe and were to answer the question, so Frank, what exactly is going to happen? What should I say? What should I say?
Well, I think first you will see a stronger commitment to some of the issues that are still major challenges to ASEAN. One would be this non-tariff barriers that they will have to commit themselves to, and they will know that the world will not take them seriously if they can't address this problem. And I think that is being felt around the region. One. The second would be implementation. As I said, from ratification, which is constitutional, which is legislative in nature, to implementation on the borders. Where do you open your borders? Do you have the immigration officers there 24 hours? Do you have customs officers there? Understand the requirements, understand the commitment among yourself and between yourself. That is still difficult. And translating that national commitment at the ASEAN level to ministerial regulations that still need to be amended in many countries, down to the departmental announcements that still need to be done in many countries. So these are the things that they will have to commit themselves to. Otherwise, and Malaysia is very much committed. I hope they have, the ability to do it. They have problems inside too. But Malaysia knows that after 3 years of relatively new member states being chair of ASEAN, this is for the first time after 3 years, it's the old member. And Malaysia would like to see progress being made. So the commitment to issues that need to be corrected, the implementation of commitments that have already been made, and I think the third one probably would have to be the real target of improvement of that figure of 25% trade among ourselves. Otherwise, it is not going to be a viable economic community. We have tried that for a long, long time. And it's there. 24%, 25%, down to 24.5%, up to 25%, never beyond that. Maybe it's the nature of this landscape that we trade more with the world, 75%, we trade less. But it is difficult to convince everybody that you are one integrated market. Foreign direct investment can help. Foreign business coming in can help. But what we are concerned about is major foreign multilateral corporations are going to take advantage of ASEAN than the ASEAN companies, the SMEs of the ASEAN companies. We don't want that. But I think if you talk to Ford, if you talk to Toyota, Mr. Tanaka is coming up here, if you talk to major corporations, they will say that they are benefiting. They can benefit more if we do more, but they are benefiting from these agreements among ourselves. So, consumer products, consumer goods, major retail companies, the automobile companies are saying they are benefiting, but they want us to move faster. And that's my message. The ASEAN private sector will have to come over and respond to that expectation from the major companies outside, because they want to make sure that they produce here, they have the other 9 markets. They produce in Indonesia, they have the other 9 markets. Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Dr. Surin Kap, the chair, Malaysia is very equipped, and I think Malaysia has a long agenda. They want to do a lot this year. Next year is Laos. So I think that they are thinking, of course, in Vientiane about what to do, and then they have some exercises and some training to be able to chair ASEAN successfully, effectively. So in terms of anticipating visually, first of all, visually, when we get into December 31st, I mean, people are going to be celebrating. What do you see? I mean, looking ahead, there's going to be a big fireworks in some, I think, KL or Vientiane, and then they say, okay, we have the ASEAN community now. And then on the first week of January, then what happens? So on holiday, and then ASEAN will come up with a new revamp or another visionary statement about ASEAN Community 2.0, or what do you think?
Definitely, the next day after the 1st of January, all of us will be recovering from the hangover. Not of the drinking the night before, but certainly of the, euphoria of everything ASEAN, because it's the community. But I think Laos will inherit that momentum. And I think a country like Laos can certainly focus on the coordination and cooperation, how to bring up the Mekong River Basin as a group. Japan is very committed. Australia has certainly made a lot of effort. The US, China, the EU are helping the 3-4 countries of the Mekong River Basin. When we talk about equity, when we talk about improving ASEAN integration, we need to talk about that divide. And I think it would be very logical for Laos to focus on the bridging that gap and trying to make sure that more dynamics coming into the region. And I think they need to do a lot of deregulation among themselves. 5 years at ASEAN, my advice was that you learn to speak the language of the global marketplace. Profit will be important. Profit will be the ingredient to bring foreign investment into any economy of Southeast Asia. So don't despise profit, because you are not going to expect major donors to come in and say, we build road, we build port, we build airports for you. No longer. It will have to be investment. It will have to be driven by profit. It will have to be driven by the private sector. So I think if somehow they can look into these things and try to synchronize with the rhythm of ASEAN, a lot of them have gone very far. It would be good, taking that momentum forward.
Okay, this will be your last round. If you want to have any question or comment, please raise your hand. In the meantime, it's instructive. You mentioned private sector. I'll come to the questions in a moment. The private sector is really the locomotive and the thrust of ASEAN economic integration, as such as it is. And the private sector involves, the global companies, not just ASEAN companies. So they really are the future of the AEC and ASEAN. But what do you have in terms of advice for, if you leave ASEAN to the governments and officials, it goes very far on paper, but very short, very near in reality. So we have to rely on other actors, other drivers. What do you have in terms of advice for the, peoples of ASEAN, the socio-cultural stuff, and the academics? I know that we talk a lot. Academics are very equipped. They talk a lot. We know ASEAN well, but the people, the socio-cultural. I mean, how do we get ASEAN peoples to know each other more and better? And before you answer that, I'm going to take just a round here. I have a couple hands up here, and we'll throw this in. Please, gentleman in the blue shirt. Please tell us who you are and go ahead. Do you have another microphone? I think there's one behind you. Sorry about that.
Dr. Surin, I was wondering if you could speak.
Please tell us who you are.
Matthew from DFDL Legal and Tax. Dr. Surin, I was wondering if you could speak on the potential impact for the AEC of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, given China's focus on AEC and the fact that ASEAN needs nearly $1 trillion of infrastructure investment over the next 20 years. Is there a risk of an over-reliance on China? And is further integration necessary for a regional negotiating position, or are strictly bilateral investment deals sufficient?
Okay, ASCC, and then China's AIIB, and there's a question over here, a hand over here, please. The lady.
Hello, my name is Marissa. I'm working at the ASEAN Thai Bev. My question is about the living document that you've mentioned. Any advice on how to materialize that? And if possible, could you advise on the urgency focus, which aspect in particular which require the closer attention? That we appreciate.
Okay, we'll take that.
Let me go to the Asian infrastructure investment and the integration, whether it's good multilateral or just bilateral. I think the idea, Chinese proposal, it's more than proposal now, is necessary, something that is filling up the vacuum. Because we have talked about infrastructure financing for a long, long time. ASEAN has set up its own committee, fund even, but it's a very small fund. It's being administered. Want to use that? I think it's $400 million to more. Right? Connectivity is real. And the community is not going to be a community. We can't ship our goods quick enough, fast enough, effective enough to each other's market. And in fact, it's become part of the non-tariff barriers because ships carrying perishable goods are only allowed to dock in certain port from the market. By the time food items to the market, it's already perishable. Part of the non-tariff barriers argument. So we need connectivity. We need what the Chinese is saying is, this is part of the contiguous landscape. For China, building down railroads and roads are not foreign investment for them. It is a continuing extension of the infrastructure to serve their own economy, to bring in goods and products from outside, and to export goods and products outside. So it is part of the neighborhood. I don't think it's any different from the US. The time when the US was trying to build the Western Hemisphere, the Monroe Doctrine, Western Europe stayed. But, targeted to something that it's needed among those countries. Therefore, the Mekong River Basin is to 3 countries are bordering China: Myanmar, Laos, and Vietnam. And, the roads and the railroads coming down are going to be part of the economic infrastructure for China itself. It's not foreign investment. It's investment connected with domestic need, the best domestic necessity. So I think it's very strategic. It's welcome that the ASEAN countries are looking for. Multilateral or bilateral, I think we need both. A lot of multilateral issues are extremely difficult. To get all these countries to agree on basic things. So the speed of bilateral negotiation is as fast as the slow. So we need bilateral arrangements in order to fill up the gaps, in order to get these bilateral agreements to serve as stepping stones toward something bigger. With Europe, we tried the big one, Europe and ASEAN. It didn't work. And I have warned our European friends that, 3 years of negotiation on this is going to be a challenge. They didn't really like the statement, but in the end, they have to come to something they call variable geometry, meaning we'll take each one at a time. Those who are ready, those who are willing, we will enter into negotiation, hoping that at the end we will have ASEAN-EU free trade agreement. But the landscape here is very uneven. It's very difficult. Again, a stepping stone, a collection of steps, block-to-block kind of agreement. On making it a living document, let's take Thailand as an example, as a case study. Well, Thailand needs to do more. Improve of our people. You come to Bangkok, you don't feel it being cosmopolitan. You go to Manila, you go to Singapore, you go to Kuala Lumpur, the cosmopolitanism. Nothing wrong with that. It's our inheritance from the past. But we have used that as an excuse for a long, long time, not an explanation. We need to open up more. We need English proficiency. We need the new mentality. I talk about the younger generation. We need better education. We need better preparation. We need to open. Are not very fond of leaving countries to work outside. I think Thai BEF is experiencing that. I think Thai BEF is trying very hard to train new generation of businessmen who are prepared, who are equipped, who are willing to move outside of the Thai economic landscape. You have to, and other companies will have to do the same thing. I have seen younger Thai grads, younger Thai analysts, national companies analyzing markets in ASEAN, assessing companies in ASEAN for extra ASEAN entities coming in to take over. Fewer Thais working for Thai companies, trying to understand the landscape, trying to take over the neighborhood in the landscape of ASEAN. We have to change that mentality. That Thais are now willing to go out and work outside, expand a little bit, not just here. And for your information, Thailand has quotas at the UN and other international agencies. We have never to fill the quota because we don't find enough capable and willing bodies to go out and work, either in Geneva or in New York or in Vienna or anywhere. This will have to change too. Understanding the landscape, having the language facility and the mentality that you want to move, you want to take advantage of this landscape opening up, that is a big, big effort on the part of Thailand. And the rest will have to do the same thing. Singapore doesn't have to do much, because Singapore has already been very open, very, very willing to compete, to open up, and to go. Singapore has this regionalization policy long before ASEAN community idea, meaning go out and invest outside. Go to Thailand, go to Myanmar, go to Indonesia, go to Vietnam. Singapore has had that mentality for a long, long time because it realized that it doesn't. Singapore, as an economic engine, is bigger than its own space. Thailand is coming to that point, but not quite there. But we have the mentality to get across, and that is we need to move out. No other economy in the modern world is enough to be inside. Japan has to go outside, Korea has to go outside, and more contribution to your GDP from outside will have to increase every year. In the case of Thailand, we have to do the same thing. And other member states of ASEAN will have to do the same thing. Cross-border, invest outside, make money outside, bring the profit in, invest more. That's the only way to create this landscape as one integrated market, competitive, and able to be integrated with the global community seamlessly, which is the of the ASEAN economic community. We need to know each other more. We need to know each other's markets more. We need to be more comfortable with each other. We need to respect the differences among us. We need to appreciate the diversity among us. These are the things that 600 million people of ASEAN will have to do. Tremendous diversity, but precisely because of that diversity, we are helping each other out. But we need to appreciate that difference rather than making it an issue of conflict among us. We must turn around that diversity to make for our community building. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me wrap up this bringing up your allusion to the Monroe Doctrine. I don't think we have this destiny now in our hemisphere. I think it has to be a collective destiny, and it has to be a destiny that we all make up, one that is also a work in progress. Please join me in thanking first Ken Koniyaki for supporting us, Nikkei Asian Review, and then of course our keynote speaker this morning, Dr. Surin Pitsuwan. Thank you very much.